Now, I have the privilege to introduce the former pro-life whip of the Texas House in 2017. He's an attorney. And one thing about this gentleman, Matt Rinaldi, and I actually were able to meet a couple of weeks ago. And I found out that he is the first American Italian, right, of your family. He's a first generation. That tells you how great America actually is and that we're still making history as well. Matt is also, he was the, let me put my glasses on. He was a member of the Texas House of Representatives for District 115 in Dallas County. He's currently the current chairperson of the Republican Party of Texas. So I want to introduce, with a round of applause, and all you Texans that's outside, Matt Rinaldi, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me here today. I appreciate it. I'm chairman of the Republican Party of Texas. I served in the Texas legislature for 4 years with Senator Huffines, actually. And I represented Northwest Dallas County. You're actually sitting in my district now that I represented. It was a majority-minority district in the state of Texas, which the most conservative Republican in the Texas House, according to Rice University, held for two terms. So a swing district that was majority-minority, I held and was consistently rated among the top 2 most conservative Republicans in the Texas House. So we can stick to principles, we can win swing districts, and we can win majority-minority districts by sticking to our principles. And I think I proved that. I want to echo something that Senator Huffines talked about. He's exactly right. They do care more about what Democrats think in the Texas House. I can tell you that. Funny story about Senator Huffines. He's a close friend in the Texas legislature, and I had an amendment to the open carry bill, which would prohibit police from stopping you merely because they see you openly carrying a firearm. You need reasonable suspicion to stop somebody, to question them, and what my amendment said was reasonable suspicion is not merely established by openly carrying a firearm. Well, I knew I couldn't get the amendment passed in the Republican House, which had a near supermajority, unless I got a Democrat to carry the amendment. How sad is that? So I talked to an African-American Democrat who was concerned with racial profiling, and he liked the amendment. And we passed it in the House, and I remember the night I called Senator Huffines, because it was short notice, they were bringing up the bill in the Senate, they stripped off my amendment. And I called Senator Huffines, and I said, this is a good amendment. You gotta carry it in the Senate, please. And I remember I had paper in front of me. It's like when you write out, the phone conversation before, because you know it's going to be a difficult one. And I expected him to, put up resistance because it was a tough carry on a bill. And he goes, okay, really? It's probably going to be about 8 hours of debate that you're signing up for right now. He's like, no, sounds good, I'll do it. It's like, that was the easiest conversation I ever had. And Senator Huffines took the amendment in the Senate. And keep in mind, this is a pro-gun amendment. And we formed a coalition of conservative Republicans and African-American Democrats to support this amendment and oppose leadership, which was opposing the amendment. So think about it. African-American Democrats, the most conservative Republicans, forming a coalition to oppose leadership on a gun bill, and we won. I thought that was amazing. But then that's a little bit about what I want to talk about. I want to talk a little bit about where the Republican Party is going, where we are, and where we're going, both as a state, as a country, as a party. And where we are now is a pretty difficult position. We have, politics has affected each one of our lives more than at any time, I think, in my lifetime at least. I mean, think about it. Every day for the past year and a half, you got up and you wondered what the government was going to do to you next. They prevented you from going to church. They prevented you from going to your job. Sometimes they might have put your business out of business. That's a role government should never, ever, ever have. But it provides an opportunity. It provides an opportunity for our party, it provides an opportunity for our state to fix things. Because the Democrats have a very different vision for the future than we do. What do the Democrats have a vision of? They have a vision of a lot of what we suffered over the past year. More government in our lives. More waking up wondering what the government's going to do to you next. And I don't want to live like that. So what's the alternative vision? The alternative vision is the Republican Party. We need to set a course for the Republican Party, and they've often waned from this course. And I've been frustrated with it too. But we've got to set a course from the grassroots up that the Republican Party stands for restoring and building the America we grew up in and love, so that that America can exist for our children to grow up in as well. Now contrast that with the Democrats. That's quite a unifying message. Contrast that with the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party divides. They divide us along racial lines, they divide us along economic lines, they divide us along lines of whether or not we want to wear a mask over our face, they divide us over whether or not we choose to be vaccinated. They divide us any way they possibly can. And take the latest vaccine mandates, for example. Some of it's absolutely terrifying. If you take the statements that Joe Biden made over the past week or two on vaccine mandates, statements about unvaccinated people, and substitute for the word unvaccinated any racial or ethnic minority or group, it's terrifying. They're trying to shame them, they're trying to ridicule them, they're trying to blame all of society's problems on them. They're trying to say, you should blame everything that's wrong with this country on that particular group. We should punish them, we should keep them from working, we should not let them in our restaurants, we should let them in our social circles. Where have we seen this before? It's terrifying, and they're normalizing it. And they're not going to stop doing it with that group. We're going to see division increase in our country. But we need to prevent, we can't just say we're against the Democrats as a Republican Party. We've done that too much. And that's why we haven't secured an electoral majority that's lasting. And we need to set a positive vision. What's that positive vision? That positive vision should be a unifying message, because we have one thing in common in this room. One thing in common that unites us. It's cultural, it's deep, it's important, it's significant. We're all Americans. We all love America. We all love America and what it stands for. The ability and the opportunity to come here and to be in any segment of society economically, in any social circle, in any nationality, in any ethnicity, and achieve great things. Where else can you do that? In fact, in human history, no other society has provided that opportunity. I mean, we can look at it economically. We've brought more people out of poverty with our economic system than any political system in the history of the world. And it wasn't only limited to America. I mean, if you look worldwide, since America came into being, the world has seen more prosperity because of America setting an example and leading the way. Our country is the greatest political gift to mankind that's ever existed. And we need to unite around preserving it and continuing it for our children. And that's what the Republican Party is. America is opportunity, America's freedom, America's valor, America's hope. And that's what we need to continue. So how are we doing? Well, currently we're in an era of electoral stalemate. It seems like we're 50-50. We flipped every election for probably the past 20 years. There hasn't really been a consensus. Actually, probably since Reagan. So, why? Well, I think one thing is we don't stand for a positive vision, which I just talked about. We stand for whatever the Democrats are doing, we shouldn't do, or I guess if you're more of a rhino, it would be we should do more slowly. Well, that isn't a compelling vision. We need to unite around a vision of preserving America. And secondly, it's because we haven't turned electoral victories into policy. I mean, here in Texas, we've held both houses of the legislature since 2003. We've held every statewide office since 1994. And we're still seem to be losing ground. I mean, we've had some pretty significant legislative victories. We've had constitutional carry passed, which is huge. The ability to protect yourself without asking the government's permission. We passed the 6-week abortion ban, heartbeat bill, which is, God bless, I mean, it's just a gift from God. But Democrats have put up some pretty big victories as well. I mean, the Cowboys can score 40 points, but if their defense lets up more, they're not winning the game. So we have to do better. We have to strive to do better. We have to put up a positive vision, and we have to make our promises become a reality in the state of Texas. And I think that's really important. So where are we lacking? You know, Democrats right now are on full offense, and we need to go on offense as well. I mean, look at it. Democrats have taken over every cultural institution in America, our businesses, our schools, and they are pushing their culture, their values in everything. And we need to as well. We need to evangelize liberty with the same fervor as they evangelize socialism. And we need to do it everywhere, in our churches, in our schools. When people ask what they can do, run for school board or support somebody who's conservative, who's running for school board, because that's where it starts. The Democrats knew 20 years ago that the children were the key to changing our culture. And they did it. And we need to take heed of that and do it as well. So, when people ask what you could do it yourself and demand of your elected officials that you do everything possible, everything within your power to ensure that our priorities are passed into law and that our culture changes into one that values liberty. Now, when I was in the legislature, that took many forms. We were, most of the time you elect somebody, you look at their voting record, right? But like Senator Huffine said, you only get to vote on what's brought to the floor. The real stuff happens behind the scenes. So what does it look like when a legislator or an elected official is truly doing everything they can? We served in the 2017 session together, which was, I think, probably the most successful session in passing conservative priorities before this one. I think this one probably was more successful, the heartbeat bill constitutional carry. But we had a Speaker of the House that was effectively a Democrat. I think he aligns more with the Lincoln Project now than he does the Republican Party publicly. But Speaker Joe Strauss was our speaker, so it was very difficult to get conservative priorities passed. So what do we have to do? We had to oppose leadership. Well, that means we weren't getting the good committee chairmanships, we weren't getting the lobby money. We were effectively ostracized in the House by doing it. We knew we had allies in the Senate, because the Senate was conservative and Dan Patrick, the lieutenant governor, was very conservative. So we can get conservative legislation out of the House. We're doing pretty well. So what did we do? We were towards the end of the session. We didn't have a lot of conservative victories. There was a lot more on the table. So we had a group of 11 people in the House Freedom Caucus that we used to push conservative legislation. And we knew we needed a special session, or we needed to give Dan Patrick a bargaining chip. The Speaker made a mistake. He put a sunset safety net bill on the end of the calendar. On the last day, it was the deadline to pass bills was at midnight. And this thing is called the sunset safety net. It basically continues government agencies for another 2 years. So if it doesn't pass, things like the Texas Medical Board cease to exist. They need to pass it. And they put it on 9 o'clock with the deadline being at midnight. So we saw that and we said, okay, if we kill this bill, we can allow Dan Patrick to force a special session since he would have the only other bill that would continue government for another 2 years. So we decided to filibuster. So we talked for 3 hours. We had to talk for 3 hours impromptu, no notes, no preparation, just talk for 3 hours. That's pretty hard to do. If you've ever done it, if you've ever seen a filibuster on TV, usually prepared. This was impromptu. So we started talking on whatever bill was on at the time. It happened to be something about trade school teachers, how many years of welding experience you needed to teach in a community college. We started debating it fervently. The Freedom Caucus, the most conservative members, were vehemently arguing both sides of this. My wife was in my office watching it on TV. She didn't know what was going on. She's like, why do they care so much about welding? It's like, couldn't figure it out. So we went back and forth. Sometimes we'd switch positions in the argument, mid-argument, because the argument didn't matter. We were just killing time. It turned out they ended up calling it the Mother's Day Massacre. It was a filibuster that killed 250 bills that occurred on Mother's Day. And we went home for the weekend, and every Republican that didn't know what we were doing was so mad at us. I've never seen looks like that before. But it was necessary. We had a goal. And nobody could figure it out. But the Dallas Morning News did that weekend and said, wait, they killed this extremely important bill. I wonder if it was intentional. Of course it was. And then Dan Patrick held a press conference that Monday and said, Speaker Strauss, pass these pieces of conservative legislation or I'm forcing a special session. Strauss didn't, he forced the special session. We had a special session that year and passed, in the end, the balance of 8 pro-life bills that session, including a dismemberment abortion ban that was just upheld by the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals 2 weeks ago and passed into law in Texas. So that's what I ask you to do. I ask you to do everything you can, even at personal expense, social expense, to evangelize liberty in your jobs, in your churches, everywhere else. And don't stop, because we have a long fight in our hands and we need every single one of you to be able to do it. Organize at work so that when vaccine mandates come down, if you're vaccinated yourself, you can protect the unvaccinated workers. If you're unvaccinated, you can protect yourself. Organize at your kid's school. Meet other parents so that when critical race theory is taught or Pride Week celebrated, you can call those other parents and make it difficult and create friction to make that school change. Organize, find like-minded people in every aspect of your life. Socialize with people who aren't into politics. Talk about your values. That's how we build the America we love and that we grew up in. So thank you for having me here today. Thank you for being part of this conference. God bless you. I'm honored to be the chairman of your Republican Party. If you ever need anything, please email me, call our office. God bless you all. Thank you.